Welcome to this Atomic Work webinar on choosing the right ITSM software in 2024. My name is Sairam. I lead marketing here at Atomic Work, and that's why you'll hear the least from me and the most from my friend here, Sajeesh, who leads community, Sajeesh Sahadevan, who leads community at Atomic Work. And part of why we put this webinar together is that um, as we're building Atomic Work in the past, 1.5 years, we've been trying to figure out, the buying process of ITSM software in general, and that has led us down like a bunch of rabbit holes about how people are deciding which software to buy. Um, and like we've had a little bit of experience before in building ITSM software as well, as Sajeesh will explain. But this is where we've sort of gone in and built something for you, the ITSM buyer. And this could be, a CIO or an IT head who's just trying to figure out in this new age of like completely, new technologies, featuring AI, what is the best way to measure, sort of like put ITSM software next to each other and figure out which one is the best software for me. And so we've put this guide together, and like when we put it out, we realized that we needed to talk about it as well because it was such a good resource, and that's why this webinar. So hi again and welcome. Please don't worry about taking any notes or things. You can take screenshots. That's great, but we will send you the buyer's guide straight out. We've built it for you, so it's for you. You don't need to worry about it. We'll just send it out to you after. And so we'll just dive right in. I'm going to introduce Sajeesh, and there's a reason that you're going to hear more from Sajeesh and less from me. So Sajeesh has been in the ITSM space for over 10 years and closely seen it evolve. And as you can see, we're going to talk about this. He's been a part of two different ITSM platforms built across what we call our two different eras. And this is important in the way that we are trying to define how to buy ITSM software now. But there's also another reason why, he's the best person to take you through this, because before moving over to the business side, he was a part of the support team for Microsoft Windows for quite a while, actually. This technical support background, coupled with, ITSM platform experience as we're building, gives him a well-rounded perspective, and like not just well-rounded because that's a marketing term, but he also knows exactly what it means to raise the ticket, to close the ticket, and like look at the numbers and see and assign it to yourself, what frustrates IT people and so on. So we'll go from here. I hand it over to him, and we're going to talk about how to choose the right ITSM software in 2024. Over to you, Sajeesh.
All right. Thanks for the introduction, Sai. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining in. I hope it's worth your while. And if you have any questions at any time during the session, feel free to drop them here. So I just want to start with a quick story. This is a place in India called Kerala. And if you notice on the elephant, that's me, and then that's my daughter. So we just took a vacation recently, and my daughter loves horse riding. And when she had a chance to ride an elephant, I couldn't say no, right? So we basically the elephant went along this trail, and if you can see this one, we are by the end of that ride, we were feeding the elephant pineapples, and needless to say, my daughter got very attached to the elephant, right? So much so that when we were about to leave the place, she just flat out refused, and she wanted the elephant to come with us. Now, as much as my daughter loved the elephant, and as much as I love my daughter, uh, keeping an elephant as a pet is something that needs more thinking than just my daughter is attached to it. Now, if you've been to this place called Kerala, in a village in the state down south in India, you would know that space is not really a problem, and availability of food. If you're willing to spend enough money, availability of food is also not a limitation. So it's not technically impossible to have an elephant as a pet, is what I mean, right? But do I know how to tame an elephant? No. I'll probably need to bring in experts for it to do anything, because I don't want to die, basically. That's probably expected, and some of you folks are probably saying, what the hell, you did not get the elephant, that's the conclusion to your story. That's such a no-brainer, and I agree. And the reason we are talking about this elephant and the elephants in general is because I want to address the elephant in the room and how we tend to make impractical decisions based on ancient wisdom. This term, or essentially, the fact that you can't get fired for buying service now is something that I've heard my entire ITSM career, right? So 10 years ago, this was a big thing. Over time, what started out as general IT wisdom has become a convenient excuse for people to sidestep market research when they're looking for an ITSM tool, right? The reason I shared the elephant analogy is that although ServiceNow is great, it's highly comprehensive and customizable, versatile, and given enough resources and given enough time, basically any workflows that you'd like to automate or any use cases that you probably handle with your existing tool can be done on ServiceNow, right? The downside being customers pay millions and millions of dollars for ServiceNow, and for any major customizations, a typical business does not have the resources, so they have to bring in ServiceNow certified consultants, and and the time frames are just super substantial, right? So it might take months or even quarters to make certain customizations. So if you have the budget to spare, if you have the time, and if access to resources is not really a problem for you, your answer is simple. You might as well stop listening to me, go over to servicenow.com and sign up for a demo. While you're at it, check out the video with Idris Elba, because the millions and millions of dollars that I mentioned, some of that went to Idris. So might as well watch the video. It's fairly cool. But if you'd like to put in the work, put in the research, and if you'd like to explore your options, stay with me for the next 20 minutes, and I'll walk you through a couple of things. One, we look at the major trends that have happened in the ITSM space, ITSM marketplace over the last decade or two. We'll just keep it very high level, very brief. But more importantly, we look through a framework for choosing the right ITSM software, particularly in 2024. Now, the reason I am stressing on 2024 and the reason we are going to talk about the ITSM trends are pretty much the same. Hint, it's AI. We'll get into the details in a minute. So the ITSM landscape has been fairly static for the most part. So short-term changes and trends are fairly limited. Over the long term, there have been certain major trends, right? About a couple of decades ago, consumerization of IT was a major IT trend. Uh, Basically, what that was, and I'll just rush through this because I'm assuming most of you are already familiar with it, was a couple of things, right? One was that technology that was meant for consumers was making its way into the workplace. So think the iPhone replacing BlackBerry, right? And BlackBerry being this secure corporate device was now being replaced with the iPhone. And not just devices, right? Even software and apps like social media apps, for instance, made its way into the workplace. So IT had to deal with things like shadow IT. But this flip side, or the second aspect of consumerization, was that employees or end users were consumers in their day-to-day lives, right? So they got used to a certain level of smoothness in the apps and products that they were using. So for instance, with Uber and Amazon, things got completely transformed, right? So you could if you needed to get from point A to point B, you could tap a few buttons on your phone and a cab would arrive at your doorstep. If you needed to order food or a product, you could just tap a few buttons on your phone and you would get that delivered without having to step out of the house. So that was a moment where the new ITSM software and tools that sprouted up had the user experience as a core part of the offering. Think simple user interface where a lot of the clunkiness of the legacy software was just removed. And this came at the cost of making it less comprehensive sometimes, but generally it was just a better user experience for almost the same level of customization and same level of comprehensibility. The second one was ESM, or Enterprise Service Management, and this you might already know that it's just the application of ITSM principles and practices in areas outside of IT, like HR and legal, finance, and so forth. This also did not require ITSM vendors to do too much because the constructs were still the same. The concepts of ticketing and ticket management, ticket routing, converting emails to tickets and responses sent through the service desk were all fairly the same. The vendors just needed to build demarcations for IT and these other functions. The third one is the major one. In my opinion, this is going to disrupt the space more than any of the other trends, or at least these two trends that have happened. A lot of what we are seeing in AI and ITSM today is basically Gen AI chatbots, right? But over time, AI will become table stakes, and it'll basically transform all of the processes and functions across ITSM, right? And we are going to dissect this and dive deeper into this in just a minute. So here's a framework that I promised. We are basically going to go through 3 steps for evaluating and finding the right ITSM tool. To start with, assessing your current situation. This is something that everyone knows, and it's such a no-brainer. But not a lot of people put in the time and the effort to do it right. So, what do I mean by this? When you're assessing your current situation, you look at your current processes, your use cases, and so forth, and you come up with a list of requirements for your existing capabilities and features that you need, right? So once you have the list of requirements, you sort them on the basis of what's must have, what's nice to have, and which you can wait for instance. And finally, once you've narrowed down the list of tools that you're considering to the final 2 or 3, we'll give you a few yardsticks to look at, scrutinizing them and finalizing the best solution for your particular business. Now, assessing your current situation. It starts with processes and practices. Basically, what are the processes that your current ITSM tool is being used for? There are other things that you need to look at here, but one of the examples being, what does the end user experience look like today when they're creating the ticket, and their post ticket creation experience? What does it look like? How can it be made better? Among other things, right? So the buyer's guide that Sai mentioned goes into great level of detail for this. Next is use cases and users. So typically 80% of the tickets that come in are about 20% of the issues, right? What are you doing to make the flow more seamless? How is the team dealing with those issues, and how could they be made better through smarter routing, smarter automation, and so forth? Finally, the tech stack and integrations. Your ITSM platform doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a part of a larger tech ecosystem. So in this phase or in this sub phase, you look at what other devices are currently integrated, and what tools are not integrated right now that should be integrated, right? You'll also look at where the data is flowing into the ITSM system from, where the data is flowing out, and so forth. And at the end of this phase, like I mentioned, you would have a list of requirements. Now, in addition to what you would typically use your ITSM platform for, right? So incident management, problem management, request management, we wanted to focus on 2 specific features that pretty much all ITSM vendors would be offering soon if they're not already offering. And although the first two specifically mention AI would expand across all the other processes that you see here. And I won't go into the specific applications of AI in, let's say, incident management or problem management, but the buyer's guide covers that, of course. Now, let's look at AI assistant, and then we look at AI powered automation and how it's way more powerful than what we use today. Now, putting a Gen AI assistant or bolting on a Gen AI assistant on top of existing products and architectures is the go-to low-hanging fruit for ITSM vendors. So if a vendor needs to market itself as quote AI powered, the easiest thing to do is add an AI assistant. But in case you're evaluating a software and working closely with the vendors, here are a bunch of questions to ask them to understand how practical the AI assistant would be and whether or not it would be useful for the end user. So the first one is, of course, where does the AI assistant live? If the end user needs to go to a portal to access a chatbot, they might as well go there and create a ticket because it roughly takes the same amount of time. So see to it that depending on whether you're a Microsoft ecosystem that uses Teams for internal communication and collaboration, or a Google ecosystem that uses Slack, your AI assistant needs to live on the platform, be it Microsoft Teams or Slack, that employees or end users use to communicate and collaborate with each other. There's no reason contacting your IT team should work any differently. The second one is, does it provide citations? So, Gen AI has been known to hallucinate, and even if it is not hallucinating, it's probably summarizing the contents of a particular knowledge source and giving just a very distilled, narrow view of it. If an end user wants to explore more details or get the complete context, they should be able to click a link and go over to the knowledge source, which could be a support article that lives on Confluence or Notion, wherever, or it could be an external link. But there should be a specific citation, that every answer should accompany. The third question that you need to ask them is, can end users provide feedback on the efficacy of the answers? So essentially, it could be a simple thumbs up, thumbs down button, but end users should be able to provide some sort of feedback. It could even be escalating the issue to an IT support agent because the answer that they received from the Gen AI assistant was not satisfactory. And you, as an IT admin or someone leading the IT organization, should be able to look at a dashboard and be able to see how many tickets did the AI assistant deflect. Now, a proxy to this would be a question that was asked to the assistant that did not end up becoming a ticket. And you should also look at how many instances happened where the AI assistant gave an answer that was not satisfactory and the end user had to go ahead and create a ticket anyway. And what are some of those topics that the assistant gets wrong most of the time? So you can fortify your knowledge base with those topics. The next one is, what happens when the issue is escalated to an agent? Now, this is perhaps the most important one, because in case the agent or go back to the IT support portal and raise a ticket and or send an email, basically follow the same steps that they'd been following until recently before the AI assistant was introduced, they're going to regress to their old behavior, right? They're going to bypass the AI assistant, which might as well have been a hard-coded chatbot, because one, it's not helpful, and two, when the ticket or issue needs to be escalated to a support agent or a human, you need to explain the whole context all over again and follow the same process all over again. So see to it that the assistant communicates the context to the agent, or at least fills in the context in the ticket creation form that it pops up. Finally, there would be certain questions where you would not want a Gen AI generated answer, right? And your colleagues in the legal team would agree that there would be questions where you would want the assistant to act like a chatbot and provide a predefined verbatim response. Make sure that this is also something that's provided by the vendor and that you can define for the AI assistant uh, to work accordingly in case some of those questions are asked by the end users. Next, AI powered automation. So, historically, workflow automations in ITSM solutions have been very if this, then that, right? You define a trigger and you define certain conditions that need to be met and some actions that have to happen downstream, right? So the bigger problem with this approach is that you need to create workflows for basically all cases and all edge cases, and you need to take into account things that might not be super intuitive. And every time there is an issue that comes in, or every time something happens that there is not an existing workflow for, the user or the process needs to regress to the old manual way of doing things. But an AI assistant can actually parse or understand the and I use the word loosely when I say understand, of course, but it can pass the context and it can basically infer from the message from natural language and set in motion certain automations depending on how robust your ITSM tool is. Right. For instance, here, just a disclaimer: Atom is the AI assistant from Atomic Work. You could replace this with anything that the vendor that you're evaluating provides. But if you notice here, Emma said, "Hey Adam, I want to request time off for my vacation from Monday to Thursday next week." The AI assistant understood that time off request needs to trigger workday, and it understood that Monday to Thursday next week corresponds to these specific dates, and it went ahead and raised a request for Emma, and that was approved by Emma's manager. So the approval workflow, all of it was completely automated, and make sure that you're demanding of your vendor and these common workflows come out of the box, even if it requires integration with other common systems, be it your HRMS, be it your access management system, and your AD, and those common systems essentially. Finally, we come to the last phase where once you've distilled it down to 2 or 3 vendors, here are a few things that you should look for, right? The first one is security and compliance. And you need to look for standard certifications like SOC 2, ISO 27001, CSA star. And then depending on your industry and depending on the region where most of your customers and employees are, you can look for things like HIPAA or GDPR or CCPA in case your customers or employees are in EU or California. The next is customer reviews and feedback. So most vendors will allow reference calls with existing customers, right? You need to ask for the ones that are relevant to your industry or business context for these calls. And when you get on calls with them, ask specific questions that are contextual to your IT operations and challenges that you're grappling with or trying to solve with this new tool. This one's interesting. So the biggest leverage that you get from buying the solution rather than building it in-house is the amount of innovation that it brings to the table. I mean, think about it. A dedicated team of engineers and product managers focused on keeping the platform cutting edge is generally a worthwhile investment. So ask your vendor whether they are adding some features or doing something that's not simply based on the competitive landscape, but is uniquely based on customer insights and customer problems. Scalability and flexibility. So, like, essentially, the system needs to scale up as your organization scales, and it needs to handle the increased load without performance degradation. So in this case, look for flexible pricing models that make sense today and will continue to remain viable in the future. And if your organization spans across varying languages, cultures, regions, and time zones, etc., check if the platform can accommodate and account for those nuances. Now, the final thing to look for is cost benefit analysis. There's a reason I didn't just put cost here, because it's possible that all of your tools that you've shortlisted at this point fall within your budget, but at the same time, it's also possible that all of them require you to stretch your originally allocated budget, right? So compare the pricing of the tools with the benefits that they offer. Now, it could be based on operational efficiency or cost savings, but understand the total cost of ownership and the total ROI that you get from the tool that you finally select. Now, this is a summary slide. You're free to take a screenshot of it, and it just encapsulates everything that we just went over. But you can download the complete buyer's guide that Sai had promised initially. That also includes a detailed checklist that you can share with the team that's responsible for scouting for and doing the market research for the new ITSM tool. That's it. We are at the end of the session. Sai, do we have any questions?
Yes, Sajeesh, thank you so much for taking us through it. I hope it was useful to for the listeners and the folks who are like trying to figure out what software to use for them this year and for next year. Like I had a question before that. You've been doing all this research, right? When you're putting this guide together, and you've been in this space for quite a while, and this is I don't know, this is the third, fourth software that that you're using, and and at least the second one that you're building. What was the most surprising thing for you in terms of the research in terms of the research that you've been doing, that okay, people are not looking at or IT buyers are not looking at this very keenly when they are considering tools?
Sure. So one of the things that I had initially thought, or one of our hypotheses was that IT support agents would be inclined or motivated through gamification, right? So essentially, one of the tools that I looked at closely was had this game mechanics element where every ticket that was resolved by an agent would give them some points, and in case the ticket had high employee satisfaction score, then the points doubled. If it had low ESAT scores, then they would get 0 points or negative points. Turns out IT agents who are solving serious problems and challenges saw that as a distraction, right? So that's one example that pops into my mind, of something that we as ITSM vendors over-indexed on, and turns out IT organizations and IT teams are not very thrilled about.
No, makes sense. We do have like a bunch of questions. Like one of the things that okay, so like I think the question is in terms of incident management, but the larger question in there is, you spoke about a couple of examples in which we were pretty basic, but how does AI, for example, go into the most important modules that we use in ITSM, incident asset, for example, right? How can AI help there, and does that help the the admin in any way possible?
Yeah, of course. Incident management is perhaps the bread and butter process or practice, to quote ITIL for of the IT support team, and AI can can help the end user find answers better. So right now, what happens is, irrespective of how big or small the issue is, in order to contact support, the end user needs to raise a ticket or send an email that eventually becomes a ticket. and then they need to wait for the ticket to be assigned to an agent and wait for a response. Uh, uh, if the team gets knowledge management right, and there's a comprehensive knowledge base, and there is a Gen AI assistant that's smart enough to find the exact answer and provide it to the end user, right? That's one example. Most of the time, the tickets are about, or the reason someone contacts IT support is about a question or about simple issues like password resets and they or access to SaaS software, for instance, right? Uh, if you have a tool, or if there's an AI assistant that is able to automate password resets without a human agent being involved, that'll basically deflect 60 to 70% of password reset tickets. There would still be some users uh, who would prefer talking to an agent, but that's one example. Even on the agent side, it let's say before responding to a ticket or before reaching out to the end user, an AI assistant can help an agent understand when was the last time something similar happened, who was the agent who handled it, how did they solve it, uh, and in very limited time, right? Typically, there isn't enough time, if particularly the agent is on a call with the end user, to go through the ticket backlog. But an AI assistant can sort of parse through all of that and distill down a quick response for them. Those are just two of the very rudimentary use cases. I'm sure there are more use cases, like clustering similar incidents together for problem management, right? And maybe giving the agent the authority to decide whether it is associated with the same problem or not. And the possibilities are just endless. But yeah, those are some of the use cases.
Awesome. Let me look at the questions again. Okay, one question is about atomic work. Yeah, yeah. We like that. Does atomic work have all the capabilities promised here? Yes, but that's not what we're here for. So we'll like slide on. But then, one question I've been wanting to ask Sajeesh is that like you've been like, what are the warnings, right? What should vendors be very wary of? Like right now, we've been talking about, okay, these are the things that you should look at. These are the things that you should definitely ask for and get a perspective on from your vendor. What are the things that you should be so wary of, and also say, hey, like, does this are you sure this is not do this, especially in the context of AI?
In the context of AI, there are certain guardrails that we've spoken about and published about as well. But you need to make sure your data is secure, right? So, certain the AI assistant needs you need to make sure that the AI assistant is not using uh, your employee data or your business data to train its language model, right? And there are certain sensitive pieces of information like credit card numbers, social security numbers, although within a business context that might not be uh, super frequent. But you need to check how intelligently or how smartly the AI assistant handles the sensitive information, whether it would automatically mask or delete credit card numbers or passwords, for instance, right? And
Mhm.
of course, the your data shouldn't go outside the confines of your business, no matter what. So it shouldn't be used to train the large language model.
Nice. Yeah, that makes so much sense. We have a question from Gaurav, and he's asking, yeah, like this is a good question. Like, when we talk about ESM, it's not just limited to ITSM, right? How are new AI-based products making sure that they are ready to use by other departments as well? Like, this is something that we have spoken about, Sajeesh, and like, that can be a good question to answer.
Sure. So, yeah, ESM as a trend, happened quite some time ago. So, a lot of the vendors have, basically created certain demarcations in terms of AI. Also, uh, routing, for instance, one example could be uh, looking at words like payroll, salary, and routing the ticket to the finance team, right? For instance, all of that could be done through a smart AI system, provided that there are specific, as long as it can pass the question asked by the end user and uh, understand, find certain trigger words, right? Uh, Another thing that IT organizations can do is create specific channels. For instance, if they use Slack or Microsoft Teams, or even email, right? There could be specific email IDs or specific channels called Ask IT or Ask HR, where
Mm-hmm.
the support agents can join in and respond to questions and queries, but the AI assistant can take on most of the simple queries and deflect tickets most of the time, particularly if the team is on vacation or during off hours or during the weekends. It can still provide the end user with a reasonable experience if if it's a small team and cannot be available 24/7, and an AI assistant is able to deflect some of the tickets or smartly address employees' sentiments and frustrations. That's the other thing, right? Like, as opposed to a standard chatbot that's just programmed to provide certain canned responses, AI can be trained to understand the sentiment and pacify the end user, and perhaps understand the context also, right? As to why certain issues that are seemingly simple and low priority are important uh, in this context, and then provide a relevant solution or address the issue before escalating it to an IT agent or an HR agent, for instance, right? So yeah, essentially demarketing support on for the end user, and providing routing based on smart context, context detection, I would say. And for the teams, it can for let's say legal, it can pass legal documents and quickly provide answers to the agents, who can then provide those responses to end users.
Nice.
That's a good
Thanks.
question.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Thank you. Thanks, Sajeesh. The one question is like, does the checklist have an AI readiness checklist? Yes, there is one. Like, I think it's either added to it or we'll figure out, but we'll also put that up on the blog, on the Atomic Work blog. You can just go atomicwork.com/blog and we'll have something for you. And like one question that invariably you will get, Sajeesh, and I think it might be a good question to sort of like to go out on, is like, how do we calculate ROI? Especially when you're switching from a legacy system that you've been using for a while and people are used to. And like, what is the cost of switching? But there's also, what is the cost of not switching? Like, so this is part of another question that's turned up. What is the cost of like switching, and are we, do we as like vendors and users, right? Sort of calculate that in, and or slash, what is the cost of not switching to this new technology that is going to, as you said, like in a question that you were answering, it was going to take away at least 60 50 to 60% of the tickets that that repeatedly turn up, the passwords, I've been locked out and this and that. And if that is happening, what is the, like, how do we calculate the ROI of switching versus not switching?
Okay, I'm going to split up the answer into two parts here. The tangibles and the quantitative ROI, and things that you can see in terms of ticket deflection, in terms of number of productive hours saved for the IT team and the end users, and also the qualitative aspect of it, right? So imagine if your IT team is dealing with mundane requests that keep coming in from different users, right? Password reset, for example, or some simple queries, or access to certain tools that they should have access to, right? Uh, Dealing with just unplanned mundane tickets, when in case they're working on something more important, that context switching is super stressful, right? And being on call, quote unquote, 24/7, right? Let's say you're responsible for a certain server, and at 3 a.m you get a call about it, right? You uh, IT support can be a thankless job, where things might be going completely efficiently and smoothly, and you don't get a pat on your back. But if something breaks, then you have to address it quickly, and all the brickbats start flying all over the room, right? uh, AI can, one, detect certain issues before they happen. So for instance, if, let's say, a server has been running out of storage space every 17 days, right? A user might be just dealing with it as a ticket, and just probably adding more storage space, or doing some diagnosis and troubleshooting, maybe doing malware scans and stuff. But if you detect that something has been happening, you can, or if an AI system detects that something has been happening or something is likely to break, it can take preventative measures, or it can alert the IT team. And so, like, how do you measure the ROI of something that doesn't break, right? Eventually, like I said, AI would become table stakes, and the cost of not switching is that your competition would adopt AI, not just in IT support, but also in other areas of the business. And that's a major cost, I would say. But yeah, you can always measure the tangible ROI by looking at how many tickets were deflected, and how many productive hours were saved as well. So both pick your pick the metric that's more important to you, qualitative or quantitative.
All right, thank you, Saju. I think we've covered like a bunch of stuff. I hope this was useful to our listeners. We're gonna go out now. The buyer's guide itself is the attachment. You can go ahead and just download it, and we will also be sending out a link to it later. Plus bunch of things that we've covered here are on the Atomic Work blog, atomicwork.com/blog. You can go and take a look. We'll be writing constantly about things like this that will help IT leaders and CIOs, not just choose IT and software, but also the general landscape of what's going on in AI and ITSM and ESM. Thank you so much for coming. This is Sairam Krishnan, the head of marketing of Atomic Work. Saju.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for the engaging questions. And I'm pretty sure once you get the buyer's guide, you'll find it useful. And don't forget the checklist, and and put in the market research, folks. There are a lot of options, and things are starting to change. Things in the ITSM landscape would look a lot different very soon. So yeah, don't be lazy. Do your research, and pick what's best for your business specifically.
All right. Thank you, Sajeesh. This is Sairam, Sajeesh, and Sajeesh's daughter's elephant signing off. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.